Hello everybody, I'm really glad you could make it here today. If you're new around here, thanks for dropping by, and if you are a returning viewer, it's good to see you again. I really do appreciate you. Now, I just got too lazy to record an intro. That's why this video is starting off with recycled footage from the painting video, but yes, today we are finally gonna be weathering the Mark 6, and all the weathering is gonna be done with oils. So if you are curious as to what oil weathering looks like, this is the video for you. Now, I'm planning on titling this thing a simple desert weathering tutorial, but you might think to yourself, if the weathering is so simple, why is this video so long? Well, you're just gonna have to stay tuned for that, so enough of me beating around the bush, let's get that Mark 6 ready for the North African desert. First thing I'll be doing in this weathering process is a filter, and I don't know why I start off with a filter, but I just do. Normally, when I weather a tank, there are two things I do. I either start off with a pin wash or a filter, but for some reason I decided to do a filter first. And this filter is made up of 3 oil paints, that being Van Dyke Brown, Naples Yellow, and Yellow Ochre. So back to the weathering process, right? Why do I start things off with a filter? I have no idea. It actually would make more logical sense for me to do a pin wash and then a filter after, because you can sort of clean up the pin wash with the filter, but for some reason when I was weathering this thing, I hadn't thought this through all the way, and so I just end up doing a filter first. Here I am just mixing up the filter, and I don't have any set ratios, nor do I save the ratios of any of my mixes, so if you want to achieve a filter like I have, you're just gonna have to go off the visuals, and here I am just applying it overall, the vehicle, even the captured stripes, and here it is. You can't really tell, and as I'll find out later in the weathering process, the filter is extremely redundant. I won't be needing this anyway, so if you do want to weather a desert vehicle, I highly suggest skipping the filter, because spoiler alert, the dust I apply at the end just pretty much does the work that the filter does. So let's move on to the next step, and that will be the pin wash. Here I am just applying the pin wash, and the color I use for this is burnt umber, since it's the darkest of my browns. And the pin wash is a very important weathering step, and I could make a video on it, except for the fact that my pin washes aren't very good, but there are a lot of resources on YouTube for this, so you can just search up how to do a pin wash, and you'll find lots and lots of videos. I don't think I really need to make one. One thing I have to point out about my pin washing process is that I don't have an airbrush, and as a result I can't really varnish things. So the way that I get this pin wash to work is to just flood the surface of my tank with oil thinner, and then use that to help the pin wash, I guess, apply to the recesses. So the filter and pin wash have dried, and let's start to do some discoloration. You can also see that my background has changed. That's because my black background is actually a Panzer jacket, and I don't want to mess that thing up because it cost me over $100. And yeah, I just don't want to spill oil paint on my kind of expensive jacket. And these are the colors I use for everything. It's not just the tan or the, I guess, dark green. So I use sap green, Naples yellow, some soft white, and some other colors. Oh, I think here it is. Van Dyke brown. There it is. And let's just start applying the discoloration. And so I'm going to be starting off with the tan color. And this is either just straight Naples yellow or a mixture of Naples yellow and white. And you can see I'm applying dots, and it's very much like a dot filter, except that it's localized to one color. It's not just all over the entire tank. And you can see I'm just applying dots, and what I'm going to do is blend these dots out using either some streaking up and down motions or just tapping it. One thing to keep in mind, I lightened the color somewhat. I have some of the Naples yellow mixed with white. Some of it is, as a result, lighter, some of it is darker. And what I tried to do is apply the lighter versions of the Naples yellow in this case on the top of surfaces, so that way I can have a bit of modulation. I do have to say though, this whole discoloration thing, it really works well on single colored vehicles where you really have to do a lot to make it interesting. And for something like contour, I think it looks interesting enough, but I just wanted to give it as much interest I could. However, because this is a desert vehicle and there's going to be sand everywhere, the discoloration really didn't turn out as strongly as I hoped it would. However, I think this is just a good technique to practice on, and desert vehicles, I think, in my personal opinion, they work especially well as practice vehicles, precisely because the sand eats everything up. Because there's so much sand going on, you can sort of afford to slightly mess up your discoloration, and that way you can get some practice. Because if you stick around to the end of the video, you'll see that the sand just eats everything up. But enough of me talking about the sand, let's talk about the discoloration. So as you can see, here I am just applying it. You can sort of see what I was talking about earlier. The darker versions are more on the bottom. And once again, the lighter mixes are going to be on the top of plates to achieve a bit of modulation. And here I am just blending everything together. As you can see, I am doing a lot of the tapping motions instead of the up and down motions. I know I said that I do up and down motions. I apologize for that. But the thing is, you don't want this to become streaks. I mean, you can make it streaks, but that's why there are streaking effects, and I don't really want it to be that. I want it to be discoloration. But now we are working on the second color. That'll be the light gray, the more greenish gray. And I'm doing the same thing, except instead of Naples yellow, I'm using the sap green. Once again, for a lighter version, I'm mixing it with the soft mixing white, and to darken it, I am mixing it with the Van Dyke brown. But what I've got going on right now is just the normal sap green, and I'm sort of applying it in the middle of panels, right? Because the lighten version goes on the top of things, and the darker version, of course, goes on the bottom of things. What I'm also doing is applying it not in just dots, but like squiggles and all these weird shapes. This is something that I should have done when I was trying to discolor the tan, but this is something that I'll be doing more in the future, because of course, when you just do up and down tapping motion, your oil paints sort of keep their shape in the way that you don't get when you do streaking motions. And as a result, I think that you can really create some nice patterns and inconsistencies, almost like distressing, but with oil paints if you do squiggles. And here I am just about to blend out the green. And I have to say, you can see what I'm doing. I'm blending it out in a circular motion, and this was really dumb because it just destroyed the whole reason for the squiggly lines being there. And as a result, because I blended them out circularly, it evenly distributed the sap green, and the gray, or like the lighter gray, whatever color that's supposed to be, it just ended up looking green, and it ruined everything. And I do have to introduce a bit more interest later on, because there really wasn't anything going on. But yes, if you are going to be doing some sort of discoloration and you do draw some squiggly patterns like I had previously done, just do tapping motions. It might take longer, but it'll be a better result. So this is one of my first attempts to correct that wrong. So I mixed some sap green up with some Naples yellow, I believe. It looks quite lime, and not only do I apply it at the top of panels, I put it on all the raised edges. I also apply some dots near the tops of panels, as well as in the center of panels. Anything I can do to get a bit more interest, I will do. And you'll see what I mean by the center of panels, sort of on those, I guess, air intake covers. But yeah, anything I can do to get some interest, I will do. And I believe I add a second oil color after I blend this one out. But yeah, this was a mistake, and if I had just done it normally and correctly, I wouldn't have had to work in with this color, because as you can see, it is quite lime. It was a mistake to mix with this color just because it made it look even more green. But you can see I'm blending it out, and I am doing like up and down tapping motions because I had finally come to my senses. And here it is after the discoloration. I apologize for not showing anything going on for the dark gray, but I mean, it's more or less the same concept. You just have to mix some darker colors. I think the colors I used for that was lamp black and flat white to make a gray, and then some green to make it greenish, and sort of continue the green theme because I recognized at this point that this thing would look green, and I had to sort of go with that. But what I'm doing now is some chipping. I normally don't do chipping on my armor, especially in semi-second scale, but because it's a desert vehicle, I will do a bit of chipping. And what I am first doing is it's two-tone chipping, but I'm not really caring about the two other colors because, of course, with two-tone chipping, you apply a lightened version of your main color to sort of do the chips that haven't gotten to the bare metal yet. But I mean, I'm just treating that how it is for all three colors. I'm not mixing up a lighter version of the two grays. I'm just going ahead with the tan. And here's the thing, because it's a desert vehicle and there's going to be sand everywhere, I've learned this the hard way, the sand just eats everything up. And I guess I just said that I learned it the hard way, but I forget that this thing happens until the very end. But once again, the sand covers everything, so to me at least, there really isn't any point in mixing up all these colors for all this two-tone chipping. For me, using some tan works perfectly fine, and then of course, I'm going to be going later in with a dark steel color in the center of the chips to make some three-dimensional chips. What I'm doing next is applying some rust to some of the chips. I've seen some YouTube videos where this thing happens and I really like the look of it. I do know that using some enamel products is really popular for this sort of thing, but I don't have any enamel products on me, so I'm using oils. And the color I'm using for this is yellow ochre. And as you can see, what I'm doing is just applying the yellow ochre to some of the dark steel chips. And what I'll end up doing is just blending them out with a combination of tapping motions as well as streaking down motions, so that I have a nice combination of, I guess, rust spots as well as some rust streaks. Here is how the rust looks after I've applied it, and I am quite happy with it, but if I were to change one thing, it would be to use a more reddish tone, because the yellow ochre is quite similar to dust and doesn't read that well. However, if we're just talking about the technique, I am quite happy with it. So, what I'll be doing next is the dust, or I guess my first stage for the dust, and I am doing this a little differently from how I normally do it. See, normally I would use oils for this, but today, at least for this video, I'm giving the tank an overall filter of a dusty color, and here's why. Normally, I'd let my oil paints dry fully for at least a few days, but this is 24 hours after that happened, so I'm not too sure if the oils are dry enough. So that's why I'm using acrylics, because if I were to use just oils, the insane amount of thinner that I use would just wash out the rust that I was quite happy with. And as you've just seen, I'll be using model color khaki for that filter. And it's nothing more than a filter thinned down quite a bit and just applied liberally over the entire model. Here I am just applying that acrylic filter, and I eventually give it 2 coats instead of 1. And yeah, here it is. It's just a filter. The reason why I do 2 coats is because, as you can imagine, a filter doesn't have much pigment in it, and I wanted this thing to look kind of dusty before I did the dust streaks. And here's how everything looks. I have to say though, even though the filter itself isn't really that opaque, what I was talking about earlier with the rust streaks definitely holds true. You can see that rust streak, for example, on that sand shield. Because the yellow ochre is so light, it really does look like a dust streak instead of a rust one. So once again, if I were to redo the rust, or just for future reference, I would use a redder color, and I highly suggest that you do too, especially for these desert vehicles. Here I am working on the exhaust, and the first step I did was to paint the exhaust in Cavalry Brown. It's a very reddish color, and I did this because I wanted the final exhaust to have some red to it, but I didn't want it to be outright red, because the Cavalry Brown is the base coat and I'll be going over it with a lot more colors. And this is what I do for my exhausts. I get some acrylic colors, I dilute them a bit, and I essentially just like stipple them on, but I stipple multiple colors on it while everything is still wet. I guess this is sorta similar to distressing, but you're using multiple colors at once. I have flat earth, I have, I think, this pale brown. It's quite similar to flat earth, but less red. Have a little variation, and as you can see in the corner there, some yellow, so I can get some orange tones. And I'm keeping this all playing in real time just because I feel that this exhaust process is pretty interesting, especially since it's done entirely in acrylics. But once again, just stippling wet color on, but multiple colors at a time. So it's the final step of the weathering, and that is the dust. So for me, at least, this type of dust is really easy since I'm doing streaking only, and that's because of the acrylic filters I put on. They sort of did the overall dust thing, and now I'm just working on streaks since I really like the look of dust streaks. It's quite an easy process. First you mix your dust color. In this case it's 2 parts Naples yellow to 1 part Van Dyke brown. You mix it up, and what I do, I apply it in dots or in lines, and then I just streak it down with some vertical motions of a brush soaked in oil thinner. One thing I have to say though, I do like using both, I guess, lines or patterns and dots, because the dots give you thinner streaks while the lines give you thicker streaks. Of course, you can change everything by the amount of blending out you do, but that's just what I found as a generality. I also apply it on horizontal surfaces, whether it's the tops of the fenders, the top of the hull, top of the turret, whatever it is, and I blend that out with up and down tapping motions, and these two things in combination, at least for me, give you a pretty cool looking dust effect. Here it is, the completed tank, and I am quite pleased with how it turned out. It does quite look like it belongs in the desert. And you can see all the dust streaks. You can see on the side there, on the sand shield. You can see it on the front. You know, I'm trying to be careful with this because I only applied the dust like last night, and I don't know how dry it is or how dry it isn't, but quite nice. You can also see it on the top, on the edge of that, on the top of the turret, and as well as the dust. I applied some stuff off screen. I apologize. Some oil streaks right there. I do like the look. So yeah, I am quite pleased with how this turned out. However, there were some things that I could have done better, and this is the part where I am critical of my own work. Because yes, I am happy with how it turned out, but I agree it could have been done better. And let's start off with the pros, right? Pros, the paint job, I like it. It's a pretty cool paint job, especially the stripes. I like the stripes, and I think I handled the stripes pretty well. But yeah, I also painted contour by hand, so yeah, that was a thing. So the paint job, I like it. The chipping, I haven't done chipping on a tank in a while, especially since I do stuff in 72nd scale. Was quite happy with the chipping. The rust, I like the rust, although if I were to redo it, I would use a more red tone, since the rust, it sort of looks like dust. And the dust, I did like it, especially all the dust streaks. I am pleased with how that turned out. However, this brings me to the next point, the cons, because although I like the dust, don't get me wrong, it, I think, is the biggest, I don't want to say deficiency, but you know, I'll just say deficiency. It's the biggest deficiency of this weathering job, because the dust ate everything up. Like, you can't see any of my previous weathering stuff because of the dust. Like the color modulation, non-existent because of the dust. The pin wash, non-existent because of the dust. The filter I did, non-existent because of the dust. Pretty much everything was rendered non-existent because of the dust. And this brings me to my final point, really. How would you redo this, or how would you do this weathering job? Because I did title this, or I am planning on title this, like doing a simple weathering tutorial, something like that. Here's the thing. I think that if you were to, you know, that if you wanted to achieve this sort of result, you only need to do 5 things, really. And this is in my opinion. So the first step, chipping, right? Some might say that the chipping is part of the painting, but let's just say it's part of the weathering, chipping. The second step would be some rust, and make your rust in a more reddish tone unless you want your rust to be confused with the dust that inevitably swallows up everything. Step 3, I would say a pin wash. Step 4 would be oil work. Oil is something that I think I could have done better on this tank, but I mean, I think that just has to do with the tank itself, because the engine on the Mark 6 is in the front, not in the back. It doesn't have a engine deck with all of these access ports. I don't really know even how you access the engine. That's why I don't really know how accurate my oil streaks are. But I mean, oil streaks, that'd be the next step. And after oil streaks would be the dust. So of course, once again, we have chipping, rust, pin wash, oil streaks, and then dust. And I think you'll have a pretty similar, if not like identical, looking result. So once again, that's it, and I fulfilled the title, so this is not clickbait. So I think that just about brings us to the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I want to say thank you for watching, especially if you stuck around this far, since this video is pretty long, I have to say. If you like the video, feel free to like, subscribe, share, comment, hit that notification bell, because I really want to grow this channel. But once again, I want to say thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll be seeing you in the next one, whenever that is.